Hi, it's Chantel, and I am here to talk to you about the Northern Renaissance. In the North, during this period, so again, we're looking 1400 to about 1650 for the Northern Renaissance. Um, we've got the Reformation, some conflict between the Catholics and the new forming Protestant group that is kind of brought about by some of the questions of the decadence of the church and some belief that perhaps the priests are dividing people from being able to connect with God. And the Protestants believed that it was important to have a more personal connection with God. And to reduce some of the decadence. With that, also, we have the invention of the printing press and more access to the written word for people, and more people are learning how to read and write, and they want to have that connection. It's an age of human reflection, a little bit different than we had in the Southern Renaissance, in that it's a little more personal and retrospective. Instead of looking at glorifying, it's sort of more based on understanding and a connection. And so we see a lot more portraiture in the North and a lot more looking inward at who are we and what is our place here and what do we believe in. Here is a portrait by Hans Holbein the Younger. He was a very famous portrait artist. And let me expand this up just a little bit here. This is Sir Thomas More, and this was painted about 1530, contemporary of King Henry VIII. Here's another one by Hans Holbein. This one is known as The Ambassadors. It is pretty fascinating. Remember when we talked about with Leonardo da Vinci, all of the symbolism that was in the paintings? The Middle Ages, we had a lot of symbolism. This painting is full of symbolism. It is a portrait of two French diplomats. They were in the court of Henry VIII. And throughout, there are really fascinating images. It's kind of hard to know exactly what they stand for. There's various astrological equipment and compasses and scopes and globes. And there's the lute here has a broken string, which might be symbolic. This is also pretty fascinating here. There's this image down here. It's a skull, and if you look at the picture from the right angle, it is a fully dimensional, normal looking skull. But from most angles, it's very elongated and obscured and bizarre. And we don't know exactly what it's there for. It's kind of fascinating. Here's one of the famous paintings of Henry VIII, and it was painted by Hans Holbein the Younger. And you can see that with the portraiture, we're trying to capture what the people really looked like. There's kind of a flattening, but we're still trying to capture a sense of detail and realism here. Albrecht Dürer, playing much more with the highlights and the shadows, trying to capture his own sense of humanity and who he is, trying to see inward as much as celebrating the human form itself. This is his famous signature piece there. Yeah, Dürer, this was his self-portrait from about 1500. He also did some amazing work with engraving. So this is his Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. done as an engraving, intended that it could be used in a printing process, and duplicates could be made from it. And this is his idea of what a rhinoceros would look like based on descriptions and based on a quick glimpse at a rhinoceros. Um, Fascinating illustration, and that's probably one of his more famous works today. This is a portrait by Jan van Eyck, a Dutch painter. This is Arnolfini and his bride, painted in 1434. Again, there's a whole lot of symbolism here that we don't know for sure, including, the shoes and the purpose of the dog here. A lot of people comment on the fact that she looks very pregnant. In the Middle Ages and into the Renaissance, a lot of people wore very high-waisted dresses, and there was some padding which kind of encouraged the idea of the pregnant body form, whether or not you were pregnant, because it was showing that you were fertile, coming off of the bubonic plague and a lot of death. The idea of life going on was a very positive sort of thing. And there's images in the background here. There's a reflection of them in the mirror, which is kind of fascinating. Moving on, this is another Van Eyck, a famous work of his called the Ghent altarpiece. We have Adam and Eve and stories from the Bible, and just that depiction, and communication about the stories from the Bible. This is done as a triptych, so this piece was designed to fold inward, as was this. And you can see that there's a flattening of the images, much like we had in the Middle Ages, but yet there's a sense of dimensionality as well. Adam and Eve look like they're actually in these hollows, and almost like they could step out of the picture. This is an altarpiece, another triptych that was done by Hieronymus Bosch. Bosch is a pretty fascinating character, and we've linked a couple of videos to this next piece. So this one is The Temptation of Anthony from 1501. This is Bosch's Garden of Earthly Delights. Hieronymus Bosch painted this from about 1510 to 1515. It is a fascinating piece, and you'll see more of this in the video, how it folds together and the images on the outside. But you can see it really was the inspiration for surrealism, which we'll experience a little bit later in our course here. And just, some of the bizarre interactions he has happening in here. The idea is that this first panel is creation, and here again we have Adam and Eve being created by God, and this is the in-between phase, and then this back here is hell, and final judgment and hell, and what all of this leads to. So it's a fascinating piece, and as I said, we've attached some videos because Bosch is really pretty interesting, and this piece is pretty bizarre. And as I was finding images of this for you, I also found these. They just made me laugh. You can buy a Garden of Earthly Delights duvet cover and pillow shams, or you can even get a bomber jacket with the Garden of Earthly Delights on it. That just made me laugh. And last but not least, in the Northern Renaissance, we have William Shakespeare, along with his contemporaries Milton and Bacon and a bunch of others, Johnson, and he was a pretty fascinating literary character. His works fit into this quite well because he also tried to explore who we are as people and the sense of humanity. Again, we've attached a couple of videos for you, a quick overview of who Shakespeare is, and an example of a soliloquy um, being done by Kenneth Branagh, who you might know from some of the Harry Potter films. So I hope you enjoy those. I think they're pretty wonderful. So with that, that kind of concludes the Northern Renaissance for us. Um, a little more introspective, a little more subdued, perhaps, than the Southern Renaissance, but still a real exploration of who we are and what's important and why are we here, and trying to express that through art and music. So thank you very much.